Welcome to livingpianos.com. Robert Esser here with such a great show. Train your brain. Spencer Myer's piano practice strategies. Spencer is on the faculty in piano performance at Indiana University, Bloomington, where I have a degree in piano performance. And I've known Spencer for many years. In fact, he studied with my sister, Corin Estrin Minor, from the time he was a young child until after high school, going to music conservatory, and he's gone on to such an illustrious career. I want to tell you a little bit about Spencer first so that you have a reason to watch his video. Well, I mentioned he's professor at the Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University, Bloomington, one of the largest and most respected music conservatories in the country. He's been a soloist with orchestras around the world, including the Indianapolis Symphony, the Phoenix Symphony, the Cleveland Orchestra, as well as many other orchestras. And he also was the winner of several international piano competitions, including getting a gold medal from the 2008 New Orleans International Piano Competition, and a laureate of the 2007 William Capell, the 2005 Cleveland, and 2005 Busoni International Piano Competition. So this guy, he's been around the block on the piano, and he's got a lot to say. He also has a close relationship with the Miami String Quartet. And if you want to hear his performances, he's a recording artist on the Steinway & Sons label. So let's get to it. Spencer made a video, and I was so taken with it that I'm basically showing you the techniques that he put in his video. And I have a link to his video, which you should all watch. If you like what you see here, check it out. It's in the description. There's also a link to his website that you can check out. And there's music, there's videos, there's all kinds of resources for you there. So let's get to it then. So let's start with something that I found kind of shocking. Well, how much of music is muscle memory? We all depend upon it to one degree or another. And I kind of describe it like it's flywheeling, because look, you're playing a whole piece, much less a whole program. Can you possibly concentrate fully for an hour and a half? Well, you try, but it's absolutely impossible for your memory to be 100% focused on, unless you're like a shaman or something and you can control your mind to that extent. Well, very few people can do that. I don't believe it's really possible. Thank goodness we can depend upon a certain amount where your fingers just kind of know where to go. But the question is, and it was posed to Spencer, how much of piano playing is just that, the memory of the feeling of the fingers? And he gave a shocking figure of 80%. And I think very few concert pianists would ever admit such a thing, because you'd like to believe that you're concentrating all the time, that he admits that 80% of it is just the fingers kind of going. But really what it is, I kind of liken it to piloting a sailboat. Think of the wind as your muscle memory, and your intellect, the part, your concentration, is adjusting the sail, the rudder, keeping everything going in the right path. And yet, because when you're playing something really, really fast, how much really are you thinking every note? Well, you can, but you're not going to be able to maintain that with the speed, thinking absolutely everything. Thank goodness we have that to depend upon. And the question is, how do you develop that kind of security in your playing that your fingers naturally know where to go? Well, he has a lot of interesting techniques I'm going to outline for you now. And one of them is really interesting. He talks about embracing inconsistent tempos. And you might think, you don't want to play with inconsistent tempo, do you? Well, no, you don't. But as a practice technique, it can be invaluable. Now, he uses as an example the Chopin first scherzo, the scherzo in B minor. And so what he's talking about is you can speed up and slow down kind of randomly. And if you can hold on to that, you have such consistency that in the performance, if you get flustered for a moment, you never get off track because you're used to being, even that skittish type of situation. So it's kind of something like this, if I can imitate what he showed. can see already that it provides valuable insights as to what needs work and gets you really into the zone of being able to start anywhere. Because sometimes when you're playing a performance of a piece, it almost feels like you're starting in the middle because your concentration reaffirms at a certain point, or maybe the piano sounds different, or your fingers are sweaty and it slips. And being able to play at these erratic tempos, it gives you the opportunity to get the feeling of getting back on track, which is so essential in a performance, being able to keep the fluidity of the performance, never, ever stopping. And he also demonstrates with the Chopin G minor ballade. I don't remember which section he did, but I'll just pick one at random. So you get the idea. It's a kind of a wacky idea of a technique that I never even thought of before. And I've been trying it on things. And you know what? It is a valuable practice technique once you have a piece securely learned. This isn't something you do in the formative stage. This is more of like that final polish, how to gain security when you can already play something so that you know that you're ready, that you can handle anything. All right, let's get to the next thing that Spencer talks about. Changing rhythms. Now you might think, oh, changing rhythms, you don't want to do that. You want to play accurately. Well, it's a practice technique. It's kind of turning your music into an etude. So like once again, the Chopin Scherzo in B minor, when you have you could do then you can do the reverse. That one really feels unnatural, but the security you gain is great because you're actually playing up to tempo every other note, and then gives you time to realize how the hands work together, which is invaluable. It turns any piece into an etude instantly. Now, the other thing you can do is altering rhythms to engage your mind. Like, for example, the same thing in the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata. Let's see what happens with that, changing rhythms there. And not necessarily all dotted rhythms, but random things like this. First of all, the way it goes. So, what you could do is play different groups of notes, different rhythms like this. Or you could do you can see the possibilities are virtually endless. And what's great about this is you turn your music into etudes. So instead of having to spend vast amounts of time learning mindless etudes, that is non-musical etudes that you're never going to perform, you turn your music into etudes, and that way you get the value of the exercise without having to spend time learning non-musical etudes and gaining security all the while with the music you actually play. Now, one of the most valuable tips he also talks about is figure out where the hands play together, because that is key for having security in your playing. exactly where the hands play together is one of the keys of having a clean technique. And now, what other techniques does he have? Man, his video is so chock full of techniques. You could take this one video and transform your whole practicing. I'm showing you this as a shortcut for you, and then you got to check out his video because he articulates this so well. The art of skipping around, this is really valuable. You ever have a piece with a repeated section that's a little bit different in different places? Right now I'm learning the Chopin F minor ballade, piece I learned years ago but never performed. And anyway, there's so many different variations in that, and being able to be clear on each one and skip from one part to the next. Even more relevant is like in a sonata allegro form when you have the same thing in one key and later it's in another key and they're slightly different. I'm thinking of the Mozart K283, the G major sonata. You know, the sonata that goes like this. What I find to be the hardest part of that movement is the very end of the exposition, which ends up in D major, and then at the end of the whole movement, the same passage in G major. And it's a little tricky passage, and they're just slightly different. Here's in the end of the exposition first. And then it happens in G major at the end of the movement, and it's just slightly different. It's not just that it's in a different key, it's slightly different notes as well, as you'll hear. So the idea is you skip back and forth very quickly so that you get really great security. When that passage hits, you know which one you're on. Your fingers naturally know what to do by going back and forth and gaining clarity. And you can do this, by the way, in any piece of music that has repeats that are a little different, maybe in a different key, slightly different voicings, and being so clear as to which one it is. And you can do the same thing in virtually any piece of music. The Moonlight Sonata has got this. Virtually every sonata has got this because the exposition and the recapitulation, the second subject, the second theme, is always in a different key. In the exposition, it generally modulates to the dominant, and in the recapitulation, it stays in the tonic key. And there's always subtle differences between them. You can gain great clarity by skipping back and forth very, very quickly. Now, the next technique is one of the absolute most important techniques in piano practice. After you've learned a piece and you have it secure, what do you do to keep it that way? Do you ever have a piece that goes stale on you? You have it on performance level, and then it just kind of, you don't have the same command over it anymore. You wonder, how can you gain that again? Just like the game telephone, repeating a message over and over from person to person, you can end up with a whole different message. The same thing can happen with your music if you learn it and then you keep playing it without going back to the source, back to the score. So slow, mindful practice is the answer. It's so important, I can't even begin to tell you. Now, here's an interesting story for you. My teacher, Ruth Slenczynska, who was one of the great child prodigies of the 20th century, and she, by the way, what a career. Her last album came out 2 years ago, and she's 100 years old. So she's been performing from the time she was 4 years old. She got to study with Schnabel and Courteau and all the greats, including Rachmaninoff. And as a very, very young child, she got an opportunity to play for Rachmaninoff. And she was outside of his home, and she hears a beginning student in there, which kind of surprised her. She was just a little kid. And then eventually Sergei comes to the door, the towering man, and she comes inside and realizes there was no student at all. That was him practicing so slowly, it sounded like a beginner. And I can tell you from my experience with my father, Morton Estrin, with John Ogden, with Constance Keene, with virtually every fine pianist I know, every one of us practices slowly, incessantly. It is the bedrock of practice. Once you have learned a piece, going back and playing it slowly with the music reinforcing memory. Such an incredible technique, and it should be the bedrock of your practice, along with memorization, metronome speeds, and all of that. But that slow practice well, that's what I'm doing a lot now with the F minor ballade. I can play it now. I got it learned. I'm going back and really securing things with that slow practice, and it's the greatest thing. I used to hear my father do that with all his music, and every fine pianist practices slowly, and if it's not a part of your regular practice, you should incorporate it and see how that transforms your playing. So just a recap. Slow, mindful practice, yes. Tempo variations, what a valuable technique that I hadn't really thought of before watching Spencer's video. Rhythmic alterations like dotted rhythms, but not just dotted rhythms. You can do sectional flexibility to engage your brain. And look in the description for more on Spencer, his practice philosophies. You can watch his video, and you can also check out his website. And for any of you who are thinking of getting a music degree, you can possibly audition for his class. He teaches private lessons at Indiana University, and this could be a wonderful experience for you. A great teacher, an all-around great guy, and a shout out to Spencer for making this available to people, and that's why I'm sharing it here on livingpianos.com, your online piano resource again. I'm Robert Estrin, and I thank all of you for joining me. We'll see you next time.